Welcome to the Sable International Home Buying webinar. My name is Megan Copley. I'm the Director of Real Estate Investment at Sable, which is a business we started a year ago within Sable International that has been around for a lot longer. We are 13 businesses, and we'll talk you through as we go along the different services. But we're a cross-border financial and immigration firm helping South Africans to either move themselves abroad or offshore their wealth into different investments, both property and wealth product investments. Today, we want to talk to you a bit about buying property in the UK, not necessarily from just a offshoring wealth point of view and remaining in South Africa, also for those looking to move to England and buy a primary home. This is a relatively new service that we're offering as part of our real estate investment division, along with my colleagues Edward and Lucy, who I'll introduce in a moment. We can assist you to buy your primary home in the UK, whether that's a property you'll live in now or in the future, and all the periphery services, etc., that do go with buying property in the UK for your personal use. So to introduce the team, not on the call, but very much part of the team, is Andrew Rissick. He's our Group International Director at Sable and has been with Sable for 13 years. Myself, I've briefly introduced myself. I have a long career in real estate, working in family offices and for some major firms, including Savills. Jordan and Lucy have both been in real estate for 10 years each, based in the UK. Jordan assists in the buying process, and Lucy in the after management and aftercare of our clients. As it might be daunting to own a property in the UK, we have all of the services here within the team. So today we'll run through an introduction to Edwards and Plum, why you might use a buying agent. Location, obviously very important. We'll have major factors to consider, those sort of more economic factors, and you'll have your family and personal considerations. We'll run through a little bit about new build and secondary markets, as well as the buying process. I think it's really good to touch on what's going on in the property market globally at the moment. With what's happening in South Africa, we are seeing a rise in demand of people wanting to buy property overseas whilst remaining in South Africa, whether that be for wealth creation or personal investment choices, or for residency permits. In the UK at the moment, there is a major shortage of rental property. So buying property in the right locations where there is a demand for workforce, a demand for tenants, can still be a fantastic decision and a great generational asset. Obviously, it's not just the UK. We look after Europe, the US, and Australia. So should you have any property needs, please do come to us. Each of these places is individual in the circumstance required of the buyer and of the tenant. We'll speak, I think, more independently on each place. But for now, I'll pass you over to Jordan, who will introduce himself and Lucy.
Great stuff. Firstly, thanks, Megan, and good morning, everyone. Welcome from London. So as Megan already mentioned, Lucy and I are obviously based here in the UK, and we're assisting with Sable clients that are either moving from South Africa and setting up themselves in a new home in the UK, and we also help Sable clients as well with purchasing investment property. So today we'll basically cover off most of the aspects of how to purchase, why, where to buy, what to buy, and many other aspects of purchasing a property in the UK. And I'm sure there may be some questions at the end, so I think there will be a Q&A. So if you have any detailed questions, feel free to pop those in the comments box, which I think is available to you guys, and then we can tick off hopefully some of those questions at the end and assist you going forward. So firstly, just want to sort of touch on a little bit more about how it will work. So obviously moving to the UK, if you're thinking about doing it now or you're thinking about doing it in the future, then obviously we welcome a private conversation which Megan and the team can help set up. And Sable International is offering what we call home buyer service. So this is really important. It's a new service that's being offered, and We've been working with Megan and the team now for about 12 months or so, and we've already successfully helped a number of people actually relocate to the UK. So the process really works. And finally, I just want to talk a little bit more in detail today about the process and the whys and hows and how you go about doing that. And obviously that will make sure that you're given plenty of peace of mind. So the first question that we also always get asked is, why use a buyer's agent? And so I think it's become more important as time goes on, that really you have someone that is on the ground helping you. There are many factors that people are unaware of when buying property internationally. If you don't know the UK or have never visited the UK, you may not be familiar with a lot of sort of the buying processes and things that happen with purchasing a property. It is a very heavily regulated market as well. So there are a number of things that you'll need to know. But what a buyer's agent essentially does is someone on the ground that works for you to help you, walk you through the process, make sure that you're getting the right property in the right location at the right price. And we help with that process from start to finish. And I think that's really important. So whether you are buying for an investment purpose or you're actually physically moving to the UK, there is a massive value add of why you would use this home buying service. So here are a couple of sort of main factors that really are the big draw on why you would use us. So firstly, I sort of touched on it already, but knowledge is critical. As Megan mentioned already, there are varying things that are happening globally in terms of property market. But in the UK, some of you may have seen recently that the Bank of England changed its interest rate. So for us, guiding you through kind of the updates of the legislation, what you can and can't do when it comes to buying a property, or what comes to managing a property, which Lucy will touch on a little bit later, but also just knowing the market, knowing what to buy and where to buy. The second thing is time. Having lived overseas myself, Lucy and I lived in Singapore for many years, and doing things from a distance is a challenge. If there's a time difference, if you need to fly to the UK and come down and visit or stay and spend some time in the UK, we will save you a lot of time. So from that factor, if you're still working in South Africa, again, whether this is for an investment or you're thinking of moving, the pre kind of up to buying, we will save you a significant amount of time before you arrive and get everything set up for you, making sure that your life is much simpler and much easier. And I think that's one of the critical parts, particularly for those that are still working and have jobs. The second part is independent advice. So we are there on the ground for you to help give you complete transparency. We are not there promoting particular developments. We take the brief from you to understand what your requirements of the property are. We will go out and visit properties, but we're there to guide and advise you through that process. So we'll talk to you about the good points of the property or the location. And equally, there might be some things that we need to flag to you, which a local agent won't tell you. You may all be familiar with that if you've been buying properties in South Africa. I'm sure there's some interesting agents that are pushing all the fabulous things about property, but ultimately we're there to help obviously guide and advise you through the good and the bad. And I think that's also really important for you to understand. Off-market opportunities. Well, what does this actually mean? Well, typically a lot of people start with either getting in touch with local agents or going on the portals online. So there's a lot of information out there on the property portals, and people spend hours scrolling through those properties. Typically what we find is that if you're buying from an international or outside of the UK, generally speaking, and this is not in every case, but a lot of locals don't want to sell to an international buyer. Lots of agents don't want to sell to an international buyer. And the reason for that is because they deem the transaction too complex, worried about whether they can get mortgages, worried if the deal is actually going to go through. And so what we do is help put our clients in a position where they can actually purchase the property and make sure that we're securing the right property. What we also do is work with a lot of partners. So we get you access to properties that you wouldn't necessarily be seeing, and therefore making sure that you're actually getting access to the best properties in the best location. And we work with thousands of our partners across the UK. We are specialists in London and the surrounding, but if it is for investment, we do work with partners across the UK as well, getting access to the best properties. The next point is value for money, and that really speaks for itself. But ultimately, we are there to make sure that you as the customer are buying the right property at the right price. What I've seen in many occasions before is buyers from overseas are buying properties. They will send me the property itself and said, oh, the agents told me to pay an extra 50 or 100,000 more to secure the property. That's not right. We are there to make sure that we're giving you an independent appraisal of the property. If it's listed for 300,000 as an example, where does the seller want to sell it for? What is the actual price? Where do we think that we can create the deal or create value in that property? And again, it's really important that we can be completely independent and making sure that we're finding the right value for you, the buyer. And the final thing is a range of opportunities. So really what this means is we can look across country. We can look at different styles of property, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a house, whether it's freehold, whether it's leasehold. We are an open book in the respects that we can look at different styles of property, different types of property, different ages of property. So there is really nothing that you can ask us for which we shouldn't be able to find within reason. But the great thing is that we are not bound to just promote certain properties to you. We can get access to all different things. And again, there's nothing that I haven't seen in my sort of 12, 13-year career in terms of buying and selling and renovating properties myself. So again, if you have questions about that, we can sort of talk a little bit later. But the great thing is that we're there to help support you through the buying process. And it's really important that you have someone on the ground there to help you to make your life a lot easier. So let's talk about location. So what is ultimately the right location for you? Well, that really depends on yourself. So what you're looking for, where you're looking to buy, what type of lifestyle you have, and it depends what age you are. So some of the critical factors are, for me, when helping a client choose to purchase, number one is schooling. So a lot of people that are moving to the UK, particularly with children, will look at the schools. So where are the best schools available? How do I get into that school? What are the prices of the schools? The critical factor of schooling as well will dictate the value of the price over the longer term, because if you put your children through that school and in 10 years' time you want to sell that property, the next buyer will want to buy in and obviously look to try and get their kids into that school. So schooling is a really important factor if you're at that sort of point in life.
Just to jump in there, important to note is that in the UK, and these are the sort of nuances that Jordan will bring to the table, is you get what you call a catchment area, and it's within a certain distance of the good schools where homes will have an uptick in value, because living within that catchment area is what will get your children into that local school, which is obviously in that case what we know as a government school, so you won't have to pay school fees. So that's very important. I mean, please carry on, but just to understand.
Yeah, sure. And typically, Megan, that catchment is normally within 1 mile. So you're fishing in quite a small pond when you're looking for properties near that good school. You've got to make sure that you're getting in the catchment area. So it's really important. The other factors are things like transport and local amenities, particularly if you're living in London. You may all be familiar with the zoning. A lot of people think this is for housing, but it's actually for transport. So of course, zone 1 is central, and as you move out, obviously the zones go up. But things like commutability for work, so tube access, train access, bus access, as it's becoming more expensive and to drive into places like London and Park, even other major cities like Oxford, Birmingham, Manchester, they're all going green. So what does this mean? So you basically can't drive, or you're being penalised to drive in the city centre. So the government is actively trying to get people onto transport, public transport. And this is another key factor, making sure the property is within walking distance of access to transport. Not only does that have an impact on the price of the property, but also for yourself. If you're commuting around town, you want to make sure that you've got tube and train and bus access, so it's easily accessible to get around. The second or third bits and pieces are more about the local community. So do you want green spaces? Do you want to live in a built up urban environment? What is your lifestyle like? And again, we can match properties that fit with your type of lifestyle. For those that want to live in the city centre and have, a bit more of a bustling nightlife or access to amenities, great. We also have buyers that are retired and want a little bit more kind of quieter areas with more green spaces where they can go walking and a bit more leisure. So again, we will try and match properties and areas specifically to kind of cater around what you're looking for. The next bit is property condition. You may be aware of obviously buying new properties which are in a much newer condition. So there's a lot less work to be done. Buying properties that are older that need some renovation works, there is significantly more scope to be able to get a better price. But obviously you then need to factor in the cost for renovating the property and obviously modernising and updating it for your lifestyle. Again, you need to consider these factors, but we can show you options in both, which will obviously help kind of decide, ultimately which is kind of the right property for you. So then we look at things like what else can you consider? Well, commutability I've touched on already, comparable pricing. So again, when we're looking at properties in a specific area, we will show you what is sold recently, what is the average price. If you wanted to work on the property, how much you can increase the value of that property as well. Specific conditions of the property. So is there scope to extend the property? Can you add value to that property? How easy is that to do that? Government regeneration. So we look a lot around the infrastructure that's being built. There is a new line, a tube line in London called the Elizabeth line. You guys may have heard of it. Many years ago, when the Elizabeth line was planned, houses which were dotted along where the new stations would be went up tenfold in terms of price. So for those smarter investors, buying at the early stages when the infrastructure is announced is only going to make property values significantly gain over a period of time. As an example, a friend bought a property in Ealing for around about £250,000, and then once Crossrail was built, he sold for over 500. So there's areas and things that we can look at from an investment point of view and for self-use that are going to add significant value to your property as well. And then really, Lucy will talk a little bit more about this on the rental side, but rentability. So from a renter's eyes, what does the property need to look like? What sort of amenities does it need to be near? Is the property in rentable condition? Is it a nice place to live? Crime, all of these kind of things that are factors to making sure that if you're buying solely for an investment, that you're going to be able to rent it and you're going to be able to make money. And I think, again, we will do a little bit of a forecast for you to show you, what we can do to make sure that property is in the best rental condition. And
also to add to that, obviously this is more of a home buying service, so it is more this particular service within the department is aimed at those looking to live in the UK, either in the short term or in the eventuality. But in the short term, you might want to rent the property out. So we can provide you with an appraisal, which will be suitable should you take a mortgage out on the property, or you need to know what your return on investment is going to be. We can provide you with an up-to-date appraisal of what type of rent you would get for any given property, and that might help in the decision-making process as well, which is obviously important both for your primary home and also if in the short term it is going to be used as a property investment. Yeah, exactly. And Megan, as you're well aware and having spent some time in the UK, what typically we find is that currently we have a lot of buyers that are buying properties in the UK to move in for self-use, but in the short term they will rent the property if they're not quite ready to move. So for example, if they've still got their kids in school, they may want to rent for a year before they make that transition from South Africa to the UK. So again, we will help with that process. So as I said, It's really start to end, whatever you need, we can really assist with. Okay, so here's just some great shots of basically different styles and types of property in the UK. As I've mentioned to you already on one of the first slides, we can show you a range of opportunities. So when we're talking to you about what you want, where you want it, and how you want it,
Again, we can offer different types of properties. As you can see, we can offer apartments and houses in central London right out to a slightly more rural setting. So again, depending on your lifestyle, what you're looking to achieve from the property, where you want to live, certainly we can cater to those needs as well for home buying. Again, this is just a recent example of a couple of properties that we've helped clients buy. And there are a few differences when buying property. And again, I won't go into too much detail, but in the UK, there's a bungalow, there's a semi-detached, there's a detached house. You can buy apartments. The properties come with freehold and leasehold. So there are a few different things you need to be aware of when buying a property. But again, we will advise you through that process and make sure that you understand the differences between all of them so that you can basically make an informed decision. Generally speaking, most houses are freehold, which means you buy the house, you own the land, and hopefully you can live in it and have many happy years. So let's move on and talk a little bit about buying a new home versus buying a secondary market home. There may be familiar with this in South Africa, where traditionally you buy an off-plan property, where you buy it as a drawing and you wait for it to be constructed. Obviously, physical assets are already properties that are already built, which you can buy. But there's a couple of factors that, again, we will look into and make sure that what you're looking for is falling in line with the type of property you're buying. So firstly is the objective. So, what is it you're looking to do with the property? Is it a rental? Is it for self-use? Are you looking for longer term gains? If it's for investment, the rental capability. So we will take all of those into consideration and find properties which fit within the means. The second one is around timelines. Now, of course, property is a longer term hold. I think gone are the days of buying houses and flipping them. I think that is long gone. But typically, for home ownership anyway, the average a homeowner owns property, I think something like 12 years in the UK before they move on. So again, we will look at your kind of circumstances and work out a strategy for that. I touched on it already about leases. There can be a little bit of confusion when buying a freehold, share of freehold or a leasehold. Generally speaking, most landed houses, as we call them, are freehold, and apartments come with share of freehold or a lease structure. There's been some recent changes to leases in the UK, which I won't go into too much detail, but it's making it better for buyers, and leases are being extended for long leases, so you don't have to worry too much about those anymore. A separate thing is about operating costs. So this is one of our crucial factors, and Lucy will also tell you a little bit about this when obviously managing a property. So when you buy your own house, there's work annually that you need to do on your property, whether it's a bit of guttering and cleaning and gardening and all that kind of stuff. When you talk about buying an apartment, you generally have a community charge or a service charge, as we call it in the UK, which means you contribute to the pot, and that will be for the maintenance of the block and the building itself. Something that you do need to factor in if you are going to be renting that property as well, because it can eat a little bit into your return. And the other things are around property maintenance and agency fees as well. So again, I know this is more about home buying today, but if you do rent a property, there are some additional costs which you need to think about, which factor into making sure that you're getting the right yield. So the price, generally speaking, new build properties, and I'm assuming this is the same in South Africa, with the cost of living crisis, we have seen cost of materials going up, construction costs going up. So if you do buy a new home, and I'm generalizing here, this is not in every case, but we do see new build properties being slightly more expensive. They obviously have sort of better materials, and as I said, the cost for constructing them and price of land has increased. So you do need to factor that in. Whereas buying something that's already constructed, there again, there's a little bit of scope for negotiation on price. And the final two sort of come hand in hand. So rentability and exit strategy. So again, I know we're talking more about home buying today, but if you are renting properties, don't limit yourself, look at different styles of property and take your advice of your agent. They know the market, they know what to rent it for, what you might need to do to the property to sort of increase that rent. If there's a little bit of painting or decorating, we might advise you on that to help you achieve the next level in terms of rentability. And then finally, exiting. So what do I do when I want to sell? How long does it take? Typically, if you're buying blocks, apartments in new build blocks, there's lots of apartment in a block, which means sometimes it can be slightly more tricky to sell in the future. So yes, the property has its pros of it's new and it's brand new and it's got new washing machines and dishwashers. However, if you were to sell in this shorter period, sometimes they can become more difficult to sell. And generally speaking, again, and I am generalizing here, that houses tend to make a little bit more value than apartments. But again, that's pretty much a generalization. But the critical mass is that although this seems maybe a little bit complex, we will help guide and advise you through the whole process. So certain things will bring to your attention that you need to be aware of, but a lot of this will be factored in when we start bringing properties to you.
Yeah. I think what's important to mention there is you made a very good point, Jordan, on saleability of apartments, but new build apartments will generally demand a better yield than a home because a house has upward pressure on those price points. Families demand, there's more flats available, and so your rental yield can come down a little bit. So your percentage rental yield will be better on a new build apartment than it will be on an existing home because of the higher price point.
Yeah, absolutely. So just want to sort of, before I hand over back to Megan to talk about mortgages and tax and some other bits, just want to sort of walk you through the process and just really how simple it is. So firstly, would introduce anyone to come and have a conversation with us about looking to purchase a property in the UK, and we can have a separate Zoom with you. We'll talk you through how it all works in a basic detail. Once we've got the client onboarded, there are a few bits of documents which need to be supplied, which is very standard in the UK because we are obviously licensed as a business. We then put a criteria list together. So what do you want to buy? Where do you want to buy? Your budget. And then we will then go out and start searching for the property. Now, one of the critical points of this for me is the property viewing, because ultimately this is where we're going to find out whether the properties that we see online are the right property for you. And we will come back and give you an independent appraisal of each property that we view for you and tell you all the wonderful things, but also we'll make sure that you're aware of some things that may need doing to the property, whether it's a boiler, whether it's the windows. But that's really, really important. This is where your time starts coming in, of saving you time flying to the UK and looking at yourself. We're going to do all of this for you. Once we've found the property, we will help negotiate the best price. And again, we'll advise you, making sure that you're aware of what you should be paying, how much you should pay for the property. Is there a deal on the table? What are the market conditions? How many other people are looking to purchase the property? And try and position you and make sure you're getting the best deal. And then we will help submit your formal offer for things like tax and mortgages. Megan and Sable will help arrange those for you as well to make it really turnkey and nice and simple, and making sure that you're getting the best advice when it comes to buying. And finally, the critical part here is the post-sale process, which means we will help arrange surveyors. If you need any work done on the property, we can help you with that. Getting set up in the UK, utilities, how does your boiler work? All of these different kind of things that you may not be familiar with, and we're there to help and support you through that process as well. Just making sure that if you've got any questions, once you've bought it, we're still with you as a partner to making sure that, as I said, you're going to have a successful property purchase. And that obviously then rolls on to sort of letting the property if you decide to go down the investment road. So again, we welcome anyone who wants to have a conversation with us after to sort of talk through the process in a bit more detail than we've gone through today. But hopefully that all made sense. And as I said, we welcome questions at the end. And I'll hand back over to Megan now, who will talk a little bit more about tax and mortgages and a few other bits and pieces.
Thanks, Jordan. I think it's also important to mention that the buying process in the UK is extremely different to the one in South Africa. You don't sign an offer letter and both parties are committed. There is no commitment in the short term from either party, unless, of course, this is negotiated with a non-refundable deposit. But this is the type of nuance that Jordan and myself can assist you with, getting you from offer to what we call exchange of contracts. Once the contracts exchange, you're both obliged to follow through with the purchase. But before that, there'll be solicitors' fees, There will be a survey cost, which is a professional to go and look at the condition of the property, the roof, the walls, the gutters, the chimneys, etc. And you will be, if you're the buyer, you will be paying out money. So it's very important to understand that you've got a committed seller at this stage. And that's also where we add a lot of value to ensure that both parties, so that we understand how committed the seller is before we encourage you to pay your solicitors or your surveyors. So, just a small bit of anecdotal information. With regards to mortgages and taxation, I touched earlier on multiple businesses within the Sable brand. A few of those businesses are really important when it comes to buying property overseas. Firstly, we can assist with taking the money overseas through our Out of Africa foreign exchange department. But secondly, we are financially regulated in the UK, and therefore we can do mortgages as well. So, should you want to have a consultation with our team to decide if you are able to get a mortgage in the UK, then please do come to me and I'll set that up. It's a no-cost consultation. It'll give you a very good idea if you would qualify for a mortgage and what type of mortgage and what those terms look like. This is all part of your research journey when it comes to understanding the budget that you have available for a property. Yeah, so we can assist you with that. And secondly, when looking at either exiting South Africa in the future or investing overseas, you might want to understand what type of structure is correct, or if it's prevalent to buy the property in your own name, who will be named on the lease. You can have up to 4 people on a title deed in the UK. And considering what your estate duty obligations are as well in the future, and your income taxation responsibilities both in the UK and in South Africa. We can help you with all of this under one roof. I'm pleased to say we're relatively inexpensive in the market for our services because we manage to assist our clients all within one brand. So should you want to understand all of the periphery considerations when it comes to buying property overseas, we can see through the process from start to finish, as Jordan's describing here. There's a few questions on the side, people asking about the slide deck, and we will be sending that out to everyone as well. And then actually, while we're on taxation, one other consideration is stamp duty. And stamp duty differs in the UK depending on if you're a first-time buyer or if you own property. Now, a lot of people think that that means if you own property in the UK. It is actually if you own property globally. So if you don't own a property in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, and you buy a property in England, you will benefit from a reduced stamp duty. If you do own property elsewhere in the world, then you will pay stamp duty as a non-first-time resident. And that can be quite different. It can almost double your stamp duty effect. However, there are some rules around that. So if you have property in South Africa, you're looking to buy property in the UK that you live in, then there is a time period in which you can actually claim your stamp duty back. But again, these are conversations we can have with you one-on-one. But the point is, as a business, we can assist you and we know what we do. So we've got the information to hand. But for now, I'll pass you over to Lucy.
Great, thanks Megan and Jordan for that. It was a lot of detail there for all of you to take in. So I'll talk you through the rental process. So Jordan and I have partnered with Sable over the past year to offer lettings and management services in London and surrounding areas. So we work solely with international investors and homeowners to offer a tailor-made service for clients looking for a kind of hands-off approach to property management. So here we obviously detail each of the steps and the process. I'll just move on to the next slide, sorry. And it will show you there an overview of what being a landlord means and your commitment to being a landlord. So I can go into a little more depth into each of these, each section on this slide here. But we'll kind of give you an overview so as to not waste too much time on the call. Obviously, we want to answer your questions as well at the end, so I'll leave a little bit of time for that. So firstly, getting to know you and your property. So that's a major factor for us, understanding what you need so that we can tailor that service to you. We have many clients that are investors, many clients that have previously been homeowners and their situations have changed. So they may be looking to move abroad, or and it's their family home, so they do want a little bit of extra care taken with that property. So that's our first major step in getting an idea of what you'd like to do with your property, who's going to potentially rent it, and as I say, getting more information on the property itself to help us with viewings. So advertising and rental negotiations. So advertising, we have a license to advertise all of our rented properties on Rightmove, which is the UK's #1 real estate portal. It generates over 70% of our leads for our tenants and finding tenants for you. And once we've found a suitable tenant, we'll obviously act on your behalf to negotiate the terms of that contract. And that can be quite a lengthy process because obviously it's a backwards and forwards between both parties to make sure we have the right terms within that contract to suit both parties. Viewings, we will then arrange a viewing of your property. So prior to that point, we will actually go to your property first off and arrange a viewing of your property without the tenant there. We want to know your property inside out before we actually conduct any viewings with potential tenants. So we'll give you a good breakdown of what we think your property needs to be a good rental standard. So that will be anything from cleaning, redecoration, and we'll then start to understand your property a bit more, the timeline involved in that as well. And again, in that time, we'll start sending you checklists on the type of documents that we'll need. So things such as your passports, your personal documents, your non-resident landlord tax forms, collecting information on your utility providers, anything that you can provide us at the start of the agreement with us will be helpful. But like I say, we can collect that information on your behalf. We have many different avenues that we can, if you're unsure, if you've had an investment property for years and you're unsure of where to find your utility provider, we can go and source that information for you. If you're unsure if you've had statutory certificates in the past, we again can go out and find that information for you. So that's that. Moving on to statutory compliance, again, a major part of being a landlord, as you may already know, is to make sure that you're compliant and that your property is safe for tenants to live in the UK. So UK laws, as you will well know, are all quite strict. And you obviously want to make sure you're on top of your current legislation. Making sure that you've got your gas safety, your electrical safety, your water certificates to ensure that that property is safe for your tenant to live in, and that the council or whoever it might be, the housing association might not come knocking to tell you off and basically give you either a hefty fine or some time in prison. So we make sure that we have all of that documentation there for you. And if you're handing that over to an agent, they should make sure that they keep you updated with new rules and regulations that pop up. And again, as making sure you've got the right certificates there. So the next part is inventory and inspections. So I'm just taking you through like a step-by-step as I see it in my head. So inventory and inspections. So unlike other high street agents that use maybe a third party to carry out those inventory checks, we make sure that we do those ourselves. So walking around a property to make sure, or your property to make sure that everything is fine, that everything is tested, that everything is working. And whilst we're not experts in plumbing or electrical or or we're not structural engineers, we will obviously highlight anything that we think is a potential risk to mitigate those before the tenant actually moves into the property. We want the tenant to obviously have a pleasant experience moving into your property and make sure that everything's working. so that there's no bad blood between tenant and landlord and agent before they move in with things not working properly. We also create tenant information packs. So we hand over these to the tenant on the day that they move in, walk them around the property, and that will include things, as Jordan mentioned earlier, how to control your boiler, how to control your heating controls, your appliances, where you might possibly find your stop valve or stopcock, as we call it in the UK, which will turn off your water if there was a leak in your property. So we try to mitigate all of the risks there by handing over as much information as we can at the start and following that up through the tenancy as well, to make sure that they're checking that manual and understanding their responsibilities as well as a tenant. So we also do rent collection and tenant deposits. So tenant deposits here in the UK will be protected by a government scheme that is audited, and that we would put your tenant will provide us with a security deposit that will go into this trusted scheme, and it will be protected for the duration of your tenancy or of their tenancy. And then that is given back to them, minus any deductions for any repairs or maintenance or anything that was caused as sort of malicious damage by the tenant themselves. So we're part of all of these schemes. There's a lot of different schemes here in the UK that agents need to be signed up to. So a few of them are client money protection. So where your rent collection, and again, this is only for agents, and this is for the private rented sector, for council properties as well. You'll all need to be signed up to these schemes. So another one is client money protection. And that is here in the UK, if your rent is collected by us as an agent, it needs to be ring fenced in a client account. So when your tenant pays rent to us as your agent, the bank ensures that it's protected. So again, we set up each of these accounts for our clients. And as I say, it's part of a government scheme that audits our accounts and processes as well. So that's, again, to make sure that they are protected and that you would always get your money if anything happened to us, say. That's always an important part of making sure, again, you're choosing the right agent. So Jordan touched on this earlier, so repairs and maintenance. So again, if you opt for our full management service, you'll be allowing us to have full interaction with your tenant during the stay. We'll be obviously the first point of contact for any reports of repairs and maintenance that are needed within the property. And it's obviously our job as your agent to act on this as quickly as you can. Depending on obviously the severity of the issue. If somebody comes to me and says, I've got a broken cupboard door, that's low priority. It doesn't need to be done immediately. But if you've got a leak in your property, obviously that we need to get onto that pretty quickly to mitigate, obviously, again, the damage to your property. And again, making sure that relationship is there with our tenants is so important to us, because it actually allows them to be a little bit more open with you. There is a sort of stigma here in the UK that tenants don't like to report repairs or maintenance that needs to be carried out because they're worried what their landlord might think. Now, that's not everybody. Again, that's just a generalization. It's important to have that relationship, as I say, with your tenant, because they will be ultimately there in your property, looking after it. And as I say, if there's any repairs that need to be done, they need to be done quickly, and it's only them that can report them. So lastly, we've got, again, the end of the process. So after the tenancy, after we've done your check-in reports, after the tenant's been there for a few years or however long the contract is for, there'll be a checkout and deposit management that is given back at the end of the tenancy. So how that works is, again, check-in obviously works the same as check-out reports. So both reports on both sides need to be good. So a check-in inventory will detail all of your fixtures and fittings, the condition, the cleanliness, and obviously, again, you want to make sure that that detail is also included in the checkout report. So all of our checkout reports, as mentioned, are completed by us. They're thorough, and they'll give you a complete overview on the condition of the property when it's handed over to the tenant. So again, this will ensure that any discrepancies between the reports are highlighted to you, and that any decision is made on whether any deductions should be taken from the tenant deposit. And again, if deductions are needed, we'll guide you through the process and build a case to submit to the deposit scheme. It's a free service. Again, it's part of one of these government schemes that's offered in the UK to protect the interest of landlords and tenants together. So you may or may not agree with your landlord or tenant, or either party might disagree with each other on the deductions that are proposed. So again, there's an arbitration service that is included in that tenant deposit scheme, which will help both parties to come to a decision on the deductions that will be made.
I think a lot of the clients we deal with from South Africa particularly have had poor experiences with rental property, both with rent not being paid or deposits where a landlord might run away or claim the deposit. That the UK buy-to-let market is regulated in this way. And if you, as the landlord, do not register the tenant's deposit, you are in trouble, and likewise, the tenant needs to pay the deposit before they're able to gain access to the property. So I think, Lucy, thank you. You've made and given everyone an excellent idea. The point is that this is a very well-formed process. It protects both you and the tenant, and the arbitration service is extremely fair when it comes to both tenant and landlord side, and they do tend to collect enough evidence and rule in the favour of what was fair wear and tear, and what was that genuinely does need to be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree with that. It's very fair. And we'll also help with any building a case for you as the landlord, because obviously we have all of your documents and we have all of them.
Yeah, you won't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So there's been a few questions that have come up on the side. I think quite a few of them I can just answer. A question around the cost associated. Suggest that each of you have an individual call with us. It's a 30-minute call. Let me know if you're looking for investment property or if you're looking for a personal property to use now or in the future in the UK. Those are very different types of searches. One is obviously far more emotional, and the other one is probably just numbers driven. So depending on the service you're looking for, I can advise you on what the associated cost is. Somebody else has asked us about assistance in opening limited companies. Absolutely. We do that under the Sable banner. We have an accountant director of our accountancy division based in the UK, and he would set up limited companies. But again, come to us for some advice on at what point that limited company does make sense, because it does depend on the value of your portfolio as to whether or not you need a limited company, and how many investors as to whether or not you can do it in your own personal names. In both instances, there are benefits. So we will assist with that type of professional tax advice. Somebody's asked for a property to share at this time. So I think what's interesting here is that the entry-level investment amount alongside a mortgage isn't actually that high. Obviously, it's a large sum of money, but if you are looking to invest, we would advise you could start looking from about R1 million cash. So if you have R1 million cash, then come and talk to us, and we will show you what we have available, how you can get a mortgage. Obviously, we will find out very quickly within our mortgage team if you're able to qualify for a mortgage, and we'll give you associated costs for the transaction. We can understand if you're in a position now or if you'll be in a position in a year from now. So yeah, make time to speak with us. Let's talk about exactly what your investment goals are in this property space, and we'll help. Student buy-to-let property. We can assist with student buy-to-let. We don't necessarily represent student accommodation directly. The reason being, it is a personal preference that clients buy properties with more use. Student accommodation has one use and it's not able to get mortgageability on it. So we do tend to say, rather look at a residential apartment where you could rent it to a student, you could rent it to an occupier, or a professional, or on the short term. Sometimes it's just more use, more ability, more rentability, basically. So again, this is the type of advice we would give to our clients. Yes, sorry. The minimum investment amount, R1 million or around 50 to 60,000 pounds. I'll put it in pounds. Fractional ownership. Fractional ownership is generally for an assistance of people who are living in the UK to purchase property. It's not something you can do as a foreign investment. So I think that's very important to mention now. And there's a lot of stipulations associated. It does need to be your first property purchase. You can't have owned property before. So that's not really an option, and it isn't something we can assist with. It is very much if you're living and working in the UK and perhaps you can't meet the minimum threshold for a one-bedroom flat in your local area, then you are able to buy property as a fractional ownership, and then you pay a kind of rent back to the developer. I think that's all the questions. Happy to give it a few moments if anyone has any more. I think Jordan and Lucy have covered everything excellently. And yeah, our team remains at your disposal. Should you guys want to have a private consult, please just pop me a message. I'll set it up with the appropriate person, whether it's myself and Jordan, or with Lucy as well. So yeah, we can help. Someone's just asked if you need to have a credit record in the UK. No, you don't need to have a credit record in the UK. It is something that they will look at from your country of residence, and then when you actually when you become a homeowner from a distance, they will look at the property value in the country where you're buying the property. So the lender or the mortgage provider will be based in that country. The money, etc., it's not generally a bank. It's often backed by institutional investment, even retirement funds. They will be based in the country where the property is, and they will lend to you as a foreign investor, generally up to about 75% of the property value. But that very much depends on the property and depends on the rentability of the property. So yeah, we can help. I will email everyone that's asked. How do you reach out? Yes, I should have put my contact details.
Critical bit.
There we go. On the last page, rei@sableinternational.com. And that comes to all of us, and we will happily get in touch. We are hosting a on-the-ground roadshow next week, so we'll be in Johannesburg on Monday. Durban on Monday, Johannesburg on Tuesday, and Cape Town on Thursday, Stellenbosch on Friday. So please come and see me there. Happy to have a long conversation with you about what you're looking to do and point you in the right direction. And yes, we will share the slide deck for all of those that have asked. And I've had a few questions around shared ownership, but we've covered that. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll send out this webinar as a video as well. So if you missed anything, you can follow it up afterwards. Yes, anything else from Jordan and Lucy?
No, thanks for having us there.
No, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And look, as Megan said, do reach out to us. We would love to have some conversations with you and explain a little bit more about what we do. And we look forward to helping some of you in the future.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. And we'll get in touch with everyone who sent their email address.
Great, thank you.